Hey everyone, welcome back. You won't believe the twisted secret I uncovered about my girlfriend. About a year ago, 29 male, met a woman, 31 female, at a conference in Baltimore. I was only there for work, and I wasn't expecting our night together to evolve into anything else. But we hit it off, and after cooking up for the first time during the conference, we exchanged numbers, and we kept in touch. We lived about an hour away from each other, so it wasn't far enough to completely rule out a long-distance relationship. We didn't get to see each other often, but we would text and chat when we were both available. About once or twice a month, she would visit me in the city, and we would go out together. I loved seeing her. We had a wonderful connection, and it really felt like our relationship could go somewhere. However, in hindsight, I realized that I was putting more into the relationship than she was. I didn't think anything about our relationship until I was talking to a friend about us. I explained to her how my girlfriend would visit me, but I almost never visited her. Just to clarify, it wasn't for lack of trying. I had been vocal about wanting to travel to her apartment and meet her friends. My friend was a little weirded out by that. She said that it was odd that my girlfriend didn't want me to visit her. But at the same time, my friend is the type of person who listens to a lot of true crime and watches too much television. We both kind of laughed it off like she was assuming there was something more going on. But our conversation did get me thinking. I thought I knew my girlfriend from the conversations we had, but it was all surface level. I knew what television shows and books she liked, but I didn't know anything about her family. The next time I talked to her on the phone, I asked her more about herself. I wasn't asking in a way to accuse her of anything, but I genuinely wanted to learn more about her because I saw a future with her. She just told me that there wasn't much to talk about. She gave me a short story about being an only child and her parents having passed away. It made sense that if she didn't have any family around, she wouldn't bring it up, so I moved on. Months passed in our relationship, and she still didn't want me to come visit her. It was difficult for me because I really wanted to meet her friends. By that point, she had met a few of mine and they really liked her. I wanted to see the city she lived in because I was considering suggesting that we move in together. No matter how many times I asked, she always shut down the idea of me visiting. I didn't think much about it at the time, but all of our conversations were very sexual. Whenever we would be together, we would go to dinner or bar, then we would go right back to my apartment and sleep together. I kind of just thought that it was because we were apart for so long, but after a while, the lack of depth with our conversations was getting to me. I was talking to another friend about her, just venting some of my frustrations, and he mentioned that I might be a side piece. I was very shocked to hear that and honestly kind of hurt. At the time, I felt like I had something special with her, and hearing that it might have been less than I thought was awful. He pointed out all of the facts and told me that if she's very secretive about her life, it probably means that there's something she doesn't want me to know. That thing might have been that she had a partner, possibly family. I couldn't believe that. There was no chance in hell that was the case. I actually got kind of mad at my friend for even suggesting that, so I went home and I stewed on it for a while. When my anger subsided, I started to see some merit to the point he was making. I went online to read other stories about people who were unknowingly sleeping with committed people, and a lot of my circumstances aligned. I had asked my girlfriend early on in the relationship for her social media so we could add each other, but she just told me she didn't have any. She then proceeded to tell me all about how vile she thought it was, so I believed her. However, after looking online for her, I found her profiles. She had lied about having social media, so she wouldn't have to add me to them. When I clicked on the Facebook link from Google, I realized that I was blocked. She was definitely trying to hide something from me. I made a fake account and I searched for her again just so I could see for myself what she was hiding. Just from the public view of her profile, I could see that she was married and seemed to be happy from the looks of it. There was a young child and a few of the photos. I didn't know if it was hers or what. I found her husband's name through her profile and I started looking at his. From what I could gather, they have been together since high school. I had my suspicions something was going on and I finally had an answer. Honestly, I kind of regretted looking into it. Before that, I had a great relationship with someone that I didn't feel guilty about. After looking at it, I couldn't help but feel like I was a bad person. I knew that I didn't know about her family, but I was still sleeping with her. Right away, I knew that I was going to end everything with her, but it didn't feel right to let her get away with cheating. I needed to think of some way to tell her husband and also teach her a lesson about what she did. Through looking at his social media, I could tell that he was a realtor. I reached out to him and I set up a meeting to have a conversation with him. I said I was interested in buying a house, but of course, that was a lie. I made sure our meeting was going to be during a time when my girlfriend wasn't in the house because I didn't want her to find out about it. When the time for the meeting came, we spent a few minutes chatting with each other while I tried to decide if I actually had the nerve to tell him everything. I didn't know if that would be the end for them. I hoped that it would be, because she had betrayed their marriage by being with me. After a few minutes, I confessed that I wasn't there to buy a house. I told him about how I met his wife and about the affair that ensued after, making sure he knew that I knew nothing about him and his family. He was as shocked as I was about the news. He told me something else that shocked me too. Apparently, she had been working weekends every week. She told him that it was only temporary while she was onboarding and training some new managers for work. After I told him about our relationship, he insinuated she was visiting me every weekend, but that wasn't the case. I honestly had to wonder if there was another person she was having an affair with. I only saw her once or twice a month. I sent him a bunch of screenshots and videos from our chats. I felt horrible when he was reading them in front of me. He told me that he was going to figure out what to do with them, and he thanked me for being honest with him. I spent the rest of the day feeling sick to my stomach after the conversation. I genuinely believed that she had another person that she was sleeping with. 2 days later, she called me and was immediately irate. Apparently, I had no business digging around in her life after she had made it clear she didn't want me to. I ruined her marriage, and I was the worst thing that ever happened to her. I was shocked that she was blaming me for what happened. It was her choice to lie to her husband and have an affair. If I would have known that she was married, I would have never pursued her. Honestly, the fact that she wasn't even wearing her ring during the conference said enough. After I got off the phone with her, I haven't heard from her since. Her husband, on the other hand, did end up divorcing her, and he told me that she's living with her mom until she finds a new place. I couldn't help but laugh hearing that because it made me think about how she told me her parents were dead. I'm honestly just really glad I'm past this part of my life. I'm hoping I can meet someone who is truly single and be happy. Opie, it's such a shame to hear that somebody would throw away their marriage like that. We don't hear a lot of this perspective either. Your friends were right to be suspicious about your girlfriend's intentions and motives. It took you a while to listen to them, but it's a good thing that you came around. Sometimes it's difficult to see the signs when they're in your face because you can be so blinded by love, but from what it seems like, these were all telltale signs of a person living a double life. It's really awful how she lied about her family being dead too. That's not something you want to put out into the universe, and to make such a bold lie to keep your affair going is just wrong. I really hope that she does some reflecting on herself and realizes her behavior is unacceptable and can work on herself moving forward. I wish you the best in your future endeavors, and I hope you can find someone who is more honest with you. Now, let's move on to our next story. My wife and I met when we were both working in the same office building 7 years ago. She was working a few floors below me, and we would often ride on the elevator together when we got to work. I always thought that she was cute, but I was a little nervous to say anything. As it happened, one Saturday I had to run into the office to grab some things. When I was leaving, I got on the elevator and she was there. Without anybody else around, we struck up some conversation and I jumped on the opportunity to ask her out. Things got serious with us pretty quickly when she got pregnant about a year into our relationship. It wasn't the end of the world for us. It was unexpected, sure, but there was some excitement there as well. Don't get me wrong, now that our son is here, we both love him more than anything in the world, but if we could have had him at a different time, we would have. We had some struggles in the first couple of years of our marriage because I think we both felt like we were forced into it. Even through all of that, I never doubted that she was the one. We both loved each other, and we were dedicated to working through our problems. As we got older, things slowed down for us. She was able to quit her job to focus on raising our son, and I was doing very well at work. One of my coworkers tragically passed away unexpectedly, and while my entire office was mourning the loss, we had to pick up the work left behind. After their death, I had taken on a large sum of their workload. Because of that, I was spending long nights in the office, going in on weekends, and even on some holidays. I cared a lot about my work and I wanted to make sure everything was getting taken care of, plus I thought there might be an opportunity for growth if I continued putting the work in. My sex life with my wife virtually died when that happened. It's not at all like I wanted it to be, but I was so exhausted after every day that the thought never even crossed my mind. I wanted to go home and eat dinner then sleep. It wasn't for lack of trying on my wife's part either. She would tell me that she wanted us to spend more time together, and I would promise her that we would after everything was finished with work. I know that none of this is exactly my fault, but if I were to take any of the blame for what happened, it would be my work. Projects that were supposed to take weeks took months, and I was overworking myself to the point of being physically ill sometimes. I hit my breaking point with work when I realized that I had worked for 22 days without a single day off. I spoke to my boss and I told him about everything I've been doing. He assured me that my work hadn't gone unnoticed. He gave me a handsome bonus, and I cashed out a week of vacation to take some time to relax. I was excited to be able to decompress at home with my family. However, when I was home and doing nothing, I had all the time in the things that were off with my wife. As much as she wanted us to be intimate just weeks before, she didn't seem to be interested when I was free. Of course, I didn't want to pressure her or push her, so just let it slide. She had been spending a lot of time at the gym working out. I hadn't even noticed the changes in her until I was on my vacation. She had toned up a lot of her body, she got her hair done, and she had a lot of mirror clothes. I asked her why she had changed so much and she got mad at me for only just noticing, but then she told me that she just wanted to feel more confident. I tried to assure her that I thought she was beautiful either way, but I told her that she looked great. During the week, I honestly got a little bored without having anything to do. Tax season was coming up, so I started going through my banking information to prepare. As I was going through, I found some strange charges that I wasn't familiar with. Almost everything I saw was accountable and recognizable in my bank statement except for these few charges. I didn't know what they were, so I Googled the charge name to see what came up and I thought maybe that would jog my memory. What I discovered was that it was a charge for a website called Ashley Madison. When I first heard the name, it sounded familiar. I knew I had heard it somewhere before and initially, I thought it was some kind of hair care thing my wife must have gotten. However, when I looked up what it really was, I found out that it was a website for married people to find others interested in affairs. My heart shattered when I read that. I knew that I wasn't the one who subscribed to it. My wife had paid to use an app that would set her up with another person betraying their marriage. I needed to see for myself if she was actively having one. I made an account on the website, making a fake profile to snoop around. Unsurprisingly, there were a lot of other accounts that were clearly fake and phishing for information on the users. After some looking, I found my wife. She had pictures of herself showing her face completely. Anybody that knew her would instantly recognize it was her if they saw it. She was barely being discreet about wanting an affair. On top of that, in some of the pictures, she was wearing very little clothes. She was clearly showing off her body to potential affair partners. She stated in her profile that she was looking for fun because she felt like I was ignoring her. I was furious and heartbroken all at the same time. It was very confusing to understand where she was coming from by saying she felt like she was being ignored. I knew that I had been working a lot, but it was out of my control a lot of the time. I took the opportunity to message her and flirt with her to see if she would react. I told her that it was such a shame that her husband was ignoring her because she was flawless and he didn't know what he was missing. Not long after I sent the message, she replied. She was fully responding to every advance. She was being extremely sexual too. She was asking me for pictures, offering to send some in return. I knew then that this wasn't her first conversation on the website. If she hadn't been talking to other men like this, just how far had it gone? When she got home, I pretended like I knew nothing. She had just got back from the gym, so she was hopping in the shower. I took that opportunity to look for the app on her phone and see what she'd been saying. When I found it, I saw dozens of messages between her and other men. The most shocking part of it all was seeing men that she and I both knew talking to her. They were our son's friends' parents, people in the neighborhood, and some people I even worked with. I had no idea that many people would be using a website like this, but we live in a pretty messed up world. One of the guys in our neighborhood that she had been messaging had told her he was fantasizing about her for a long time before he saw her on the app. She said that she felt the same way. From all the messages that I read, it seemed like this was the only person she had made plans to meet up with. It was clear from the context of their messages that they had slept together and were planning on doing it again. On top of that, I found messages with another man that led me to believe that my wife was considering meeting up with him. Right away, I knew that I needed to catch her in the act. She and I married so hastily that there wasn't a prenuptial agreement or anything of the sort. I needed to catch her and get evidence, and then I could proceed with a divorce. So, I used my catfish profile to the best of my ability. The good thing about being married to my wife for as long as I was is that I knew exactly what to say to her to get her to fall for me. Within a few days of me using the app, she was willing to meet up with me. I gave her an address to a hotel and told her to meet me there. I was honestly kind of shocked when she agreed. It was extremely risky to meet up with a strange man on the internet, and she was willing to throw everything away for it. She had no idea who I was. Meanwhile, I had reached out to the wife of the man she slept with and I told her everything. She was hysterical when I showed her what I found. I calmed her down and I convinced her that we needed to think logically and we needed to catch them. I helped her make a fake profile too, and we were able to convince her husband to meet at the same hotel. Our plan was in motion and all we had to do was confront them both. The time came and we left room keys for both of them at the front desk and told them to grab them and head up. My wife arrived first, and she messaged me to tell me that she was waiting in the room and attached a picture of her in her lingerie. The guy she had been sleeping with arrived next, and was clearly shocked to see my wife there. After a minute of them being in the room alone together, both his wife and I went and joined them. When we opened the door, both of them were silent as they watched us. My wife grabbed the blanket from the bed and tried to cover herself because she was half naked. They tried to act like we were in the wrong for catfishing them, but they didn't have a leg to stand on. I told my wife that I was done with her and that she had really broken my heart with her actions. I could tell that she felt guilty about it, and she tried to once again put the blame on me for ignoring her when I was working. I told her that didn't excuse what she did. Both I and my neighbor's wife filed for divorce not long after that. We had mountains of evidence of their affairs against them. Apparently, he had been with many women since downloading the app. I was able to come out on top during the divorce. My wife didn't work, so spousal support was the biggest argument that we had, but my lawyer was able to get me out of payments. I got custody of our son, but she has visitations of him. The reasoning for that was that she was so easily convinced to meet up with a stranger online. They were able to convince someone that she could potentially bring a harmful person home. I feel like I'm picking up and starting anew with my life now. It's daunting, but I'm honestly glad that I found out about her true colors before we were 15 years into our marriage. Opie, I'm so sorry you had to go through something like that. It seems like you were really being worked to the bone after your coworker's death, and your wife should have been there to make sure you're okay. Instead, she was looking for an affair. Having an affair is bad enough, but knowingly having an affair with another married person is awful. One person's selfish actions have to end two marriages. It is a little concerning that she met up with a complete stranger at a hotel. Thankfully, it turned out to be you and not some lunatic, but it's a dangerous world and you can't be too careful. It's good that it was recognized during the custody hearings. It was a good thing that you did tell the wife of the man she was having an affair with. She deserved to know that her husband was using a website like Ashley Madison. Honestly, I think the existence of websites like that is disgusting, and anybody who is using it, regardless of if they have met up with anybody, is a terrible person. I wish you the best moving forward with your son, and I hope you're able to move on from this. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact. Hi, everyone. Get ready to hear how I exposed my wife and best friend's shocking betrayal. I, 34 male, met my wife, 33 female, 10 years ago at a small art gallery in the city. My best friend, let's call him Oliver, was an artist, and he was showing a piece there. My wife was there with one of her friends, and I approached her as soon as I saw her. I thought she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, and I had to be with her. My wife's friend, let's call her Mia, actually ended up going home with Oliver that night. Somehow Oliver and I ended up marrying best friends. We thought it was funny, but it was really perfect for all four of us. We went on double dates together all the time. We took trips together, and we even planned vacations together. The four of us were practically inseparable. My wife was a librarian, so she didn't have much opportunity to travel for work. However, I worked in advertising and I traveled often to film commercials. We were used to my schedule for the most part. Oliver and Mia both worked from home on a business that I ran together online. So when I was gone, I knew that my wife spent a lot of time with Oliver and Mia. I didn't mind it at all. I was glad that she had somebody there to keep her company. During one of the work trips that I had planned, my computer had an issue with the screen, so I sent it to Geek Squad to have it repaired. While I was gone, I took my wife's computer since she rarely used it at home anyway. I got to my hotel room when my plane landed and went to use the computer to check some emails and get some work done. You can always tell when somebody clears a history on something. My wife didn't use the computer a lot, but I knew that she used it. There should have been histories of Christmas gifts she was planning on buying, bookstores, and her personal email accounts. However, the history was completely blank. I was a little curious about why she cleared the history before giving me the computer. Granted, it was her personal computer and she probably looked things up that she didn't want me to know about. If the shoe were on the other foot, I would have cleared my history before giving my computer to my wife. I didn't give it too much thought after that because I didn't think that my wife would do anything sketchy. However, moments later, I accidentally logged into her email using the saved information that she had instead of using my own. It sounds convenient, but it genuinely was an accident. I was so used to using my credentials that way that I just pressed OK without giving it a second thought. I went to log out of it right away when I realized, but then I saw an email exchange between my wife and Oliver. The message in the inbox was the most recent one out of a 280 email chain. I knew that they were friends. All four of us were. I had no idea that they were having private conversations with each other. It struck me as very odd. I clicked on it to see what it was, and I was completely broken by what I found. They were having an affair with each other. They were sending each other explicit videos and images through email and planning the times when they would be able to get together. I didn't read through all the messages, but I did look at some of the first ones that they sent to try and figure out when it started. The affair had been going on for 2 years. Anytime I was away from home, Oliver and my wife took that opportunity to be together. They slept together even when I wasn't on a working trip. There were times when my wife would sneak Oliver into the library after it was closed and have sex with him when nobody else was in the building. Early on, there were some emails about possibly bringing me and Mia in on the situation and swinging. It was Oliver who suggested it, but my wife immediately told him that I wouldn't be okay with it. She was right to think that. Oliver thought that Mia might have been convincible, stating that he thought she would be gullible enough to just do what he wanted. I thought that was a horrible thing to say. I ended up converting all of those emails into a PDF and keeping that for myself. I marked the most recent message as unread and logged out to make it seem like I had no idea what was happening. I was going to be away for 3 days working, and I had to focus on what I was doing, or I could risk losing my job. It was absolute torture trying to pretend like nothing was happening when it felt like my entire world was shattering. I had the PDF and I needed to figure out the best way to utilize it. My wife and best friend had both betrayed me, and I wanted to get back at them and make them regret ever crossing me. I mulled over what I could do when I returned, and it finally hit me. It was the middle of summer, and it wasn't anything out of the ordinary to invite Oliver and Mia over for a barbecue and some drinks. I suggested it for the weekend when I got back, and my wife was all for it. They showed up on that Saturday, and everything was normal. While we were eating, I brought up to everyone the possibility that we trade partners for the night. It was a joke. I had no intention of doing that, but I just wanted to see their reactions. Mia was appalled by what I suggested, but noticeably my wife and Oliver weren't that shocked. Oliver's lack of reaction actually upset Mia quite a bit. My wife pulled me aside and asked me about why I suggested that, but I just went back to the table and I told Oliver that it was his idea after all. I quoted what he said in the email and mentioned that he thought that Mia would be gullible and would go for it. She was very confused, so I handed her a couple of pages of the email highlights that I printed out. She read over them, and from the context, she figured out what was happening very quickly. She immediately started screaming at my wife and Oliver about what they did. She was hysterical and upset about everything, and I didn't blame her. I felt the same way when I first found out. Oliver tried to punch me in the face. He accused me of ruining his life. I didn't fight him as much as I wanted to take my anger out on him. I knew that it would only lead to more drama. My wife tried to explain what was happening to me, but nothing she said helped her. Basically, she said that she and Oliver had always been attracted to each other, and after a while they couldn't take it anymore. They ended up sleeping together. She told me that she didn't think monogamy was for her either, which would have been nice to know before I was married to her for 6 years. Mia and I both ended up divorcing them and pretty much taking everything from them in the divorce. They said that they were attracted to each other, but after everything happened, they didn't even try to be together. Oliver desperately tried to get back with Mia because he said that it was a mistake and she almost gave in to be with him. I was able to talk her out of it. I sent the information about my wife sleeping with Oliver in the library to her boss, and she was fired. Now she lives in a studio apartment in the city. She's reached out to me several times apologizing and suggesting that we give it another try. I think she's realized just how good she had it with me and regrets her choices now. I'm in a good place now after all of this, and I don't want to look back at any of it. I'm finally ready to put myself back out there and move on from it completely. I can't even imagine finding out that the two people you should have trusted most in the world have betrayed you while you're away from them and have to pretend like nothing happened. It must have been unbearable for you to go through that. It definitely sounds like Oliver wasn't a good guy by any means. Saying that he could manipulate his wife into doing something even if she didn't want to do it is very creepy. It's a really good thing that you convinced her not to get back together with him when he tried. She likely would have been very unhappy with him after everything anyway. I always think using the excuse of not wanting to be in a monogamous relationship after cheating is ridiculous. If you feel that you might be polyamorous, then you need to discuss that with your partner before you cheat on them. If it comes down to it, you might not be compatible, and that's okay. Cheating is never an option. It sounds like she was just using that as an excuse to make it seem like she was more sympathetic. Anyways, let's now get into our second story for my 28 male, fiancé 26 female, and I met at a bookstore about 3 years ago. She was working there at the time, and I was going to pick up some new books. She was stocking the shelves, and I saw her and thought she was cute. I asked her for some help looking for a particular book, and we walked off together. We started talking, and I asked her for her number, and things took off from there. I proposed to her about 2 years into the relationship. I knew from the moment that we met that she was something special. I knew I wanted to be with her, and I saw a future with her. Our relationship was great from the start, except for a few issues that we had to work through based on her past relationship. Her ex-boyfriend, who we'll call Ben, was her first serious relationship. They were together for 7 years, and throughout the entirety of it, he was cheating on her and treating her like garbage. She was single for about a year before we met. During that time, she said she did a lot of self-discovery and healed from the relationship, though it didn't always seem like that to me. I never gave her any reason to suspect that I was cheating on her, and I treated her like a queen. The only issue that ever came up was when she started to feel insecure about herself. The relationship she had with Ben put a toll on her, and there were times when she thought that she wasn't good enough to be with someone like me. Ben was a sleaze. He couldn't hold down a job. He was sleeping with anybody that would pay him any attention, and he berated her for the smallest things. I didn't do any of that. I had a great job. She was the only woman for me, and I made sure she knew how wonderful I thought she was. I would treat her with respect, and she wasn't used to it. I knew she had a lot of trauma from that relationship, and I did everything in my power to help her get through it, but I could only do so much. It was on her to take care of her trauma and recover from it. As much as I loved her, it didn't seem like she was willing to take those steps. I hate even saying it because it sounds so insensitive, but it's the truth. I suggested that she go to therapy or see a counselor, but she would tell me that she couldn't afford it. I even offered to pay for it, and she didn't want to do that. All I could do was hope the situation would get better over time. I worked a regular 9 to 5 job in the office, and she was working at the bookstore. Her hours were less regular than mine. Some days she would go in around 10 a.m., and some days she would go in around 2 p.m. I was always at work when she was leaving, regardless of the time, but I always picked her up afterward because she didn't have a car. Because she took public transportation, we shared our locations on our iPhones, so I could always make sure she was safe. It's not something I normally would have done in a relationship, but she had several run-ins with creepy passengers on buses, and it made her nervous. I also like having that peace of mind. Around the holidays with Black Friday coming up, she was picking up a lot of extra hours preparing for Black Friday sales. Part of that included optional late night hours that allowed her to prepare new displays and unpack the large quantities of inventory the store received before the sales. When she did that, I didn't see her for dinner or anything like that. I offered to pick her up when she was off her shifts, but she told me that she didn't want to disturb me, so she just planned on taking Uber. I didn't want her to get into some strange man's car in the middle of the night and have something happen, so I stayed up for her regardless. I told her that was the plan, but she insisted on me not picking her up because she didn't want to bother me. The first night that she was gone, I checked her location around 11 o'clock when she was supposed to be clocking out, and I saw that she was at the bookstore. I could see the location updating every few minutes when I checked it to show was in a car on her way home. Everything looked good, so I was less worried. One week, she told me that she was only scheduled to work late 3 days, but on Thursday, she told me that she would be working late again. I wasn't immediately suspicious about that because it seemed like a normal enough thing. I figured maybe another coworker called out or decided they didn't want the extra hours after all. That night, I did what I always did when she worked late. I was up and around the time she was supposed to be coming home. I looked at her location. Only that time, she wasn't at work. She was at Ben's house. Right away, I was wondering what she was doing there. Surely, if she had to go over to his house for anything, she would have told me about it. It feels silly to admit it, but I didn't even think that an affair was possible. It never would have crossed my mind that she would be cheating on me with him. I waited for the location to change for about half an hour and it didn't. It wasn't moving at all. I felt weird looking at her location without her knowing, so I waited about 10 more minutes until she would normally be home and I called her. She didn't answer. After that, I started to worry. She never ignored my calls or messages. I knew that Ben didn't have her best interests in mind whatsoever. From what she described, he was never violent with her, but he didn't want her to leave him. I ran through countless different scenarios in my head about what could have been happening. None of them involved her cheating on me. After the location had it moved and she didn't answer my calls, I decided I was going to go see for myself what was happening. I drove over to the house and saw a car in the driveway, so I assumed that Ben was still there. When I checked my fiancé's location, she was still inside the house. I approached the front door, but before I could get there, I heard music coming from the other side. It was the type of music you would have on a sex playlist. It was then that I realized nothing nefarious was happening and she could have willingly gone there to have an affair. I was frozen for a moment. I didn't know exactly what to do. I had a pretty good idea about what was happening in the house, but I figured if I knocked they could play it off as something that it wasn't. I ended up going back to my house and waiting there. My fiancé didn't come home for about another 45 minutes after I got back. I just rolled over and pretended to sleep while she got ready for bed. I asked her about work the following morning, and she told me that it was fine. She even made up a story about some drama that happened. She was lying to my face. She also told me that the late night hours were going to be extended for a couple more weeks. I figured that she was lying about that too. She was preemptively covering for the time she was going to be spending with her ex. That same night, she ended up going back over to her ex's house again. I knew it was happening, and I was already preparing to break off the engagement. However, I didn't want to just calmly break it off. I wanted to get some kind of revenge against her. I thought about it for about a week when she was visiting him instead of working, and I came up with something. We were going to be hosting a Friendsgiving dinner at our house, and I figured there was no better time to tell everybody about her affair than then. I almost considered not doing it then because I didn't want to ruin the mood, but toward the end of the meal, I stood up to make a toast. Everybody thought I was going to toast to friendship and my loving fiancé, but I ended the engagement right there. My fiancé was shocked when I made the announcement. I think she thought it was a joke at first, but it definitely wasn't. I elaborated by explaining that I knew she was going over to her ex-boyfriend's house. My fiancé tried to defend it, but she couldn't come up with a good excuse. I just told her that the engagement was off and that she could go stay with Ben if she wanted to be with him so badly. After that, she ran off to the bedroom to go and hide away from everybody because she was humiliated. Everybody else packed their things and left shortly after. When they were all gone, she came back out and yelled at me for humiliating her in front of all of our friends. She told me that she was sleeping with him again, and that was all that it was. She tried to make it seem like because there was nothing emotional involved and wasn't an affair. I didn't believe that there weren't emotions involved. They were together for a long time, and she stayed with him through a lot of stuff. She had to have had serious feelings for him to put up with as much as she did. I told her that I wanted her to get out of my house, and I gave her a week to gather all of her things and leave. She did end up going back to Ben. I think they're still together, but he definitely hasn't changed his ways, so she must be miserable with him. All of the friends that were with us were definitely on my side. Some of them have tried to make excuses for her behavior by telling me that she might have been manipulated into getting back with him, but I still don't care what the reasoning behind it was. She cheated on me with a man who treated her like garbage, and I just couldn't be with a cheater. Opie, it sounds like you were a caring partner who was there for your fiancé. It sounds like she had a lot of trauma from the past relationship with Ben, and it is a shame that she couldn't find a way to move on from that, so he wouldn't have any hold over her. I don't know if you had a chance to look through any messages or anything like that, but I would guess that he was probably in her ear and manipulating her. However, that doesn't excuse the fact that she lied and cheated on you. It's sad that she would leave somebody who cared about her so much and treated her so well to be with somebody who would take advantage of her the way that Ben was. I think she must have had a very low view of herself, which is not good for anyone. When you suggested that she should go to therapy or counseling, you were completely correct in that. It sounds like she should consider going. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact. Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. In today's story, Opie found out his spouse cheated on him with her manager after he found texts on her phone that described them doing some interesting things in a Walmart parking lot. In today's second story, Opie found out his girlfriend of 3 years cheated on him with a coworker, so he kicked her out, and now she is begging for mercy after realizing she is homeless and broke. Now, let's get into today's stories. I was married and got divorced a few years ago. I found love with a friend I have known for years, who I confided in, who I can only see myself with. She had been in failed relationships, and together we began a new journey with our motto, and so together they built a life they loved. Together we decided that I, who had been in a dead-end job, would resign to embark on a new career. I have gone through specific training, going through a pretty arduous trainee process. This thing has been lengthy, with little income. She has been incredibly gracious in keeping the ship afloat, and especially in the last 6 months has carried us both. Eyeing the finish line by the end of the year, I have been eager to get the required licensing and build my book of business so that we could start to do all the things we had discussed. Big picture dreams. Side note, incredible sex life, more laughing than I've ever experienced. I asked her to marry me months ago, and she happily accepted, and we were really riding on a high. The lack of income had taken its toll. I had begun feeling very inadequate, wishing I could provide, give her a sense of security, etc. On multiple occasions, she had expressed feelings that she didn't feel secure and that she often felt alone during the process. I'll admit, I have felt like a shell of myself. I grew up instilled with a hard work ethic and have confidently assured her that this chapter will be but a blip on our shared journey. I have my faults. I know that I have not been the romantic I was prior to embarking on this career change. I also realize the immense pressure and stress this has put on her emotionally, mentally, and especially financially. So this brings us to last Wednesday, September 28th. She went to an industry event, a yearly thing hosted by an industry leader. I knew who she went with. Her company is small, consisting of the owner, a friend, and a neighbor of the street, her assistant, female, and a few technicians. One particular employee, who I refer to as Jake, has often flirted, who is married, but is apparently divorcing also due to infidelity on her part. My spouse often spoke of the guy as a good worker, but that he had maintained a puppy love with her. I had shaken the guy's hand. He knew who I was. I had voiced my concerns about his flirting, and I had felt secure in knowing nothing was there. Her boss was out of town, so she went to the event with her assistant and Jake. He was their sales manager and made $100,000 a year. She told me it wouldn't be a late night. She arrived at 5:30 and she thought she would head home at 8ish. 9:30 rolled around, and at that point, I was winding down. It was a weeknight, after all. We both permanently share our location. My training often had me going out of town, so the location sharing was just a means for us, both in case something happened. I saw she had left the venue and was nearby and in a public place. She was an adult. I didn't need to know everything, but I sent a text just to see. How is it going up there? She replied, it's a great night, and that she would be home soon. She came home, and she was on cloud nine, saying the night with the vendors went well, and she was proud of how she represented her company. We went to bed with no issues. The next day, though, I noticed a marked difference in her, especially when she arrived back home from work. There was tension. I asked, is everything okay? She replied yes, but I could tell she was lying. Friday, I had the day off because we were heading out of town to attend an engagement party for us, thrown by a family member of hers. Members of my family were coming down. I got a text afterward that she was running to pick up an order from Walmart for items for the party. My mind at that point had been racing, starting when she arrived home from that event. In an instance outside of my character, I opened her new MacBook and immediately went to her messages. That's when I saw it. She had met up with Jake. There was clearly something going on. I went back and continued reading further back for weeks. It was there, flirting, escalating in nature. My hands were shaking. There were texts after their meetup in the Walmart parking lot, discussing a kiss and her enjoying the feeling of being in his arms. I knew she was on her way home. I was shaking. I purposefully left the MacBook open while it was in my home office. It was there. I was outside composing myself when my watch notified me of her arrival through a Ring camera in her driveway. I waited a minute. She was in the house. Upon entering, it was clear she had walked through the front office and had discovered my discovery. She was cold. Without asking, she said, yes, it's real. It's happening. The next 30 to 45 minutes were a blur. I was shattered. She was stoic. She brought up the last 6 months and that it was merely a crush, but there were feelings discussed. She said that it was nothing, but I know what I saw. She was defensive though, and to her credit, I invaded her MacBook on my hunch. She said she was going to talk to me that evening. It was the night prior to our engagement party, where both families would be in attendance. She was my person. I immediately made the decision that I chose her, and she replied with the same. We even had our party. We even had sex over the weekend. Over the weekend, we had small discussions, and she was even vocally regretful. Monday rolled around, and we were back to reality. She was back at work. She stated that she needed to keep the status quo because they were a small company, and the guy's efforts were needed at that stage in the company's existence. Since Friday's revelation, there were only 3 people that knew. This is already so long. It's late Thursday, and I am broken. I have tried to maintain my cool. She says she loves me. She wants me, that I am her person. She's also very quick to want to move on. I feel like I am approaching a breaking point. Opie, please open your eyes. Do you really believe this woman? If you really need to fix this, the first and foremost thing for her to do will be to quit her job and go no contact with her AP. This is the minimum that she must do. She has to convince you that she is going to fix what she has destroyed through her actions and not through her words. You screwed up by not canceling the engagement party. What makes you think she's just not biding her time to shuffle you out of her life and replace you with him? That's where this is headed. Her behavior post-discovery shows that. She's not even pretending to be guilty. She's a cake eater at best, so of course, she wants to continue on like it never happened. She's not prepared to take the flak for breaking up with you. Do yourself a favor and cut her loose. Send her off to be with Jake. They deserve each other. You deserve much, much better. Now, let's get into today's second story. So my ex-girlfriend of 3 years recently cheated on me with her coworker. When I first met her, she had nothing. No job, barely any money, and no car. She was living with her mother until she got kicked out. This isn't the first time she's jumped from house to house with family members or friends. So I took her in to live with me at my mother's house. We've been dating for about 9 months when this happened, but we were already very close and we loved each other. I helped pick her up from school. I gave her a place to stay when she had no job or money. I fought every day at my job to get her to work at my job, and she eventually got hired. I helped teach her how to drive and was there when she got her license. I was there to bring her to her graduation when she really had no one. Eventually, when she was getting financially stable, she wanted to get a car, and I was the one who helped her. It wasn't the best car, but it got her from point A to point B. During our 3 years together, we obviously had arguments, but that's normal. She also was very bipolar and didn't use many manners with people, so sometimes I thought to myself that she was kind of different from me. During the relationship, there were a lot of arguments, and she was that person that didn't like the silent treatment or didn't like to see me ignore her when we needed to cool down. She would keep poking me and provoking me to keep arguing with her, and then get really emotional to the point where she threatened to kill herself if I left her. I will admit there was a time I gave her a 1-inch punch to the arm because I was dealing with a spine injury, and she took my phone away from me when I didn't want to argue. I just wanted to look at TikToks. She grabbed me and even dug her nails into my skin so I would let go of my phone. She pulled me and refused to give my phone back while I had so much pain in my spine and sciatic nerve. I wanted to just ignore the situation and let us cool down. Anyways, fast forward to the situation. She ended up getting depressed and upset about our job because it got so bad, and I agreed with her. So she ended up finding a new job, and I was proud of her. She would work overnight and come back home in the morning, but it started getting a little weird because while most couples don't care about not shaving their legs or making sure they're very clean and good-looking at times when they're very close, she made sure she looked amazing and made sure to shave almost every day. Mind you, this was a warehouse job, so there was no point in looking amazing there. It had been a month since she started working there, and all of a sudden she started working every day overnight and always had some excuse or some story about why she was going to work early or coming home late. She looked guilty, but I trusted her so I didn't question it. That was until one day I started getting these gut feelings, like really bad, and I decided to check our tablet, and I saw messages of her talking to another guy in a very flirty way, even talking about how they couldn't wait to see each other later, cuddle with each other, and even going out on dates. When I found this out, my world just shattered, and I couldn't believe it. At the time, I was trying to contact her from work, but guess what? She wasn't at work, she was hanging out with him. So my dumb self at the time got upset and gave her PC a good punch, which broke some things out of anger and confusion. She laughed at me on the phone when I was heartbroken, thinking of all our memories, vacations, and our bucket lists. A week later, after kicking her out, she wanted to talk, and we did, but she showed no sympathy and kept denying the cheating and was saying that she needed to love herself right now and that the relationship was getting toxic. I hadn't been showing her the honeymoon stage anymore, and the reason why this all happened was because of me. But mind you, I always took her to sporting events, out to eat, to the movies, etc. almost every day, even after having surgery. She ended up moving in with this person who was younger than me and had a sports car that she liked all of a sudden, who she barely knew for a month, and she told him that I was abusive and that I never loved her and that she lost weight because she didn't eat, but she never made anything for herself. It was always me making her food or making her smoothies. My mother lived with us to see all this and didn't like the way she treated me. My ex ended up telling me that this guy supposedly was there for her and showed her that he would help fix her and never hurt her. Not only me, but all her friends and our friends cut ties with her because they knew how she was and what she did was disrespectful to all of us. They also hadn't seen the proof. I eventually blocked her on everything and she still lies about things with this guy, even though there's proof. She even told him that I'm still currently messaging her at night when I'm the one who blocked her, and I have all the screenshots of her trying to get to me. So what do you guys think? Am I at fault here? Opie, you white knighted her. This was an unhealthy relationship dynamic that was destined to fail. That doesn't mean you deserve to be cheated on, but it guaranteed the relationship was never as healthy as you perceive it. It creates a relationship imbalance. You can't save someone. She used you to get herself back on her feet and for refuge, then monkey branched to someone she thought would be better. I know it hurts, but just let her continue being toxic. She'll blow up this current relationship she's in, and then probably start to spiral. You don't know it now, but you just pulled a huge leech off your back. Focus on surrounding yourself with great people that make you feel good about yourself. Thanks for taking the time to listen to today's story. Please subscribe if you haven't already. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My wife was recovering from having our first baby. Per the doctor's orders, we were waiting 8 weeks before having sex. She was 24 and I was 26. I felt like we were too young to be parents, but at least we were married for 4 years before conceiving. This was the life I hoped for. I did everything right, according to my family, and it made me feel great. One person I met in my past told me that life isn't as simple and easy as I expected it to be, but I was goal-oriented and willing to follow any successful influencer's advice. I believed fate was on my side. Even with what I'm about to tell you, I still believe fate is on my side, because otherwise I may never have discovered the truth. On one of the last days of waiting, I got a notification at work that there was motion detected outside our house, and a box was delivered. I only worked 10 minutes away, and it was lunchtime, so I decided to pop by unexpectedly. Besides opening my package, I thought I might be able to seduce my wife for the first time in forever. I stopped for flowers. When I got to the house, there was a really nice car parked outside. I didn't recognize it. My original plan was to knock on the door and have her open it, but I decided to use my key. As soon as I walked in, I heard our bed squeaking upstairs. I barged into our bedroom door, without realizing I broke it. I could not believe what met my eyes. My wife was sprawled out on our bed with our baby's pediatrician. She immediately sat up and grabbed her face, repeatedly saying no in disbelief. The doctor panicked and ran. I didn't care. I'd have him on camera fleeing our house with his loose pants, which meant I'd probably be able to prove he was sleeping with my wife, which would certainly get his license revoked. I noticed the baby sleeping in the bassinet, 6 feet away from his mother, as she cheated on his father. My wife immediately began saying how sorry she was. She said he seduced her because he knew she waited long enough to heal. I wanted to throw up, but I was too angry and didn't want to appear vulnerable. I told her she was the sleazy, pathetic mother. I asked her why she couldn't have just said no, why she couldn't have just waited for me to get home. I felt myself starting to break down because I was realizing my marriage was over. I didn't want to forgive her. I didn't want to have sex with her. I told her these things, and she wailed so loud, she woke up the baby. My mind started working at a mile a second as I held and bounced our son. I told her that since she was breastfeeding, she could take him with her to her mom's house. Her mother was a strict Catholic, and I wasn't even sure she would let her daughter and grandson move in. She was going to be furious at her daughter's behavior, and I'd make sure she knew the truth at some point. My wife was freaking out, telling me what I already knew, that she would have nowhere to go if we told people the truth. I forced her to move back in with her mother by telling her our house was being fumigated. My Emile wasn't too fond of me, so she wouldn't even wonder where I was. After they moved out, a major twist happened. I got an anonymous typed note in the mailbox that said, "Leave me out of it or you won't be around long enough for a second marriage." I was shocked, but immediately knew it was from the doctor. What a piece of crap. I was very amused when I checked our doorbell camera and found him escaping with his pants down. I went to the police and filed restraining orders on him and my wife. Then, I made some phone calls. I had a big family, including one lawyer. He agreed to represent me. Before the court hearing, my Emile was basically forcing my ex and son out of her house, so I had to tell her what my wife did and how I got a restraining order because my life was threatened. She was beside herself. She told me I needed to come get my son at least, so I did. My wife absolutely hated this, and I think that's why her mom did it. She was so upset with her, but couldn't kick her out. She had trouble looking at her the same way. As terrible as my Emile was, she knew how necessary and important loyalty to a spouse was. Then you add the fact that my wife was a new mother, cheating with her son's doctor. Before I left with our son, I heard them screaming at each other, and when my Emile told her she wasn't mature enough to be a mother or wife. It was intense, but I'm sure my wife deserved this hellish new reality, stuck in her strict mother's house without me or her son. After the divorce, I was awarded primary custody of our son, and I was able to prove the doctor's unprofessional home-wrecking actions. He was no longer allowed to practice, so he'll have to find something new to do with his life. I am so happy with the outcome from all this. I hate that it all happened, but this wasn't my fault, so I can only adjust and accept the change. She still calls me often, asking for help or complaining about things. She used to say sorry every time, but I told her to stop. I don't always answer her calls, but she does get visitation with our son. This event made me question a lot about life and relationships. I've realized how important it is to love and trust yourself. I knew I could get through this from the moment I was presented with the issue. I knew I had no choice but to go through it, and all I had was my own strength and willingness to go on. I enjoy my life because it's all I have in my son, and I have a whole new routine. My sister watches him while I'm at work, and she loves it. I enjoy my own company and my son's, and when it comes to dating, I just take it slow and make sure everything feels right about it. That's all anyone can do. I hope anyone reading this realizes how great it is to experience life at all. I won't let this painful end to my marriage make me question how wonderful life is. Opie, I am so sorry your wife took advantage of your trust by sleeping with your son's doctor. She was not thinking of you or the consequences you would all have to face for her actions. She was selfish, immature, and impatient. I can't imagine why, as a wife with a newborn son, she couldn't have said no to this stranger and waited for her husband to get home. She gave into the temptation, despite being a married woman with a growing family. I don't think she expected to be caught, which is why this opportunity seemed acceptable. Never cheat on your spouse expecting to get away with it. The truth always comes out, either immediately or unexpectedly. No matter when the truth comes out, there will be consequences, starting with the shame and guilt they feel when they look at their spouse. A beautiful lifelong commitment is full of honesty, loyalty, and constant communication. There's nothing a spouse should know about their partner. Knowing this, imagine how hard it would be to pretend everything is fine when you know you've betrayed them. You handled this very well. I wish you the best going forward. Now, let's get into our second story for today. When our marriage came to an end, my wife was 37, working as a physical therapist for 5 years. I was 35. We were married for 11 years. We were both content without bringing children into the world. We just started going through the process of becoming adoptive parents, but that would never happen for us. I was proud of her for how hard she worked. She loved her job, and I never expected her to do anything she'd be ashamed of. One day, she came home early. I was off work that day for some reason, and she looked devastated. I asked her what was wrong, but she didn't want to talk about it right away. When she did talk to me, it was like she rehearsed what to tell me. She said her boss noticed she had accumulated a large amount of vacation time. She pretty much ordered her to take a paid vacation. I didn't understand what was so sad about that, but I did know my wife loved her job and felt restless at home. She'd usually clean or keep herself busy when she had to be home, but this time she stayed in bed. She could barely move. I knew something was wrong, but she wouldn't talk to me. I got the mail and found something alarming. It was a letter to my wife, explaining the reason for her immediate termination. I was shocked. I ran on to find that not only was she fired, she was being sued in court. I was so confused. What was happening? I walked like a zombie into her bedroom, finding my wife lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. I threw the papers at her and asked for an explanation. Once she gathered them up, she started hyperventilating. Once she calmed down, she probably figured I was going to find out anyway, so she told me what happened. 8 months ago, she'd gotten a patient to work with who was in a dirt bike accident. He was learning how to walk again, basically, and couldn't use his hands for anything either. She had fed him, spoke with him, and really gotten to know him. She helped him to go to the bathroom and shower, and when he asked her to help him with something else that wasn't allowed, she did. I was instantly heartbroken. She was mine and I was hers. By helping this guy, she sacrificed her career and marriage. What's worse is he was married too. His wife was the one suing my wife and her employer, maybe because he felt bad about it and told her. I couldn't believe it. She begged me to stay with her because she needed me now more than ever. She didn't love AP, she knew that. She just felt bad for him as his caretaker. I reminded her that the vows we took meant she would be my wife and only help me with things like that. The same was expected of me for her. She took advantage of the trust she had as a physical therapist and had sex with her vulnerable patient. For all I knew, she instigated it. She just admitted she spoke with him and got to know him well. Was that her way of telling me she fell in love? His wife didn't deserve this betrayal either, probably while she stood by his side during the long recovery. My wife had a very hard time ahead of her, but I wasn't going to make it any easier. I moved out, waiting for all this to settle before I filed for divorce. After she was found guilty and in a whole hue of trouble, it was easy for me to win more favor. She owes a ton of money and can no longer practice physical therapy. I don't know how or if she's moved forward in life. She called everyone she ever met or came in contact with to ask for help, and was met with a ton of rejections and criticism. She pretty much fell off the face of the earth after that. I don't know if she managed to pay off all that money, or if she was arrested. I never wanted to look into it and find out. By the time I could move back into our house, it was like a tomb of old memories, frozen in a time when nothing was wrong. It was scary. I had help from friends and family to get rid of all that stuff, and put the house up for sale. With the profits from that, I bought a nicer house on land with horses. I grew up with horses, so it really feels like home. I also decided I wanted my home, horses, and self to become a haven for a child in need. Since my wife abandoned me before we were able to adopt, I did it myself. I adopted a 10-year-old girl, who's now 15. I've kept very busy living life on a farm, and with my daughter's help, I give horseback riding lessons. It's like I've lived more than one life and became a better person after my failed marriage. I'm proud I made it through, and I'm happy my ex suffered through the reality of her choice. Although she says this man initiated the contact, there's no way to know that, and no matter who initiated it, it never should have happened. 2 marriages, and your wife's promising hopes for the future were ruined. She obviously wasn't expecting to be caught, and thought it was okay to risk it all for one encounter. It's a shame she couldn't see it would be the worst decision of her life. Marriages are meant to make people stronger and encourage personal growth. This can help people to become a source of light to those around them. It's a beautiful thing when it happens as it should. You grew wiser because of this unexpected life change. You became a beacon of hope for yourself and your daughter, without the help of anyone else. You are an inspiration, and I wish you continued peace and prosperity. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Hey, everyone! Welcome back to the channel. Today, I have a jaw-dropping story about a husband who uncovered his wife's affair during her Miami getaway, complete with shocking photos. You play the role of a famous storyteller on YouTube. Based on the story content provided, rewrite the shocking, attention-grabbing, and straightforward YouTube video title for viewers. Write a sentence, greet the audience in English, within 300 characters, before getting into the story, and call to action at the end of the video or collecting food for those in need. It was a great feeling to be able to help make a difference in someone's life and give back to our community. My wife has always been a social butterfly, always going to functions, and she is always out with her girlfriends, and our sex life was good. We didn't have any issues in that department, but one of my issues with her was she was very flirty with men who were in a position of power. I remember us going to one of her real estate luncheons, and she was talking to one of the developers. She was all up in his face. I didn't waste any time after that luncheon and told her how I thought she was a little disrespectful by flirting so much in front of me. She countered by saying she was just networking. Eventually, she apologized, but it did not feel genuine. As time went on, she was taking lots of trips with her girlfriends. They only lasted a few days, but she took them frequently. It was 4 of them. My wife and 3 other women. 2 were married and 2 were single. Well, that's what she told me. I was always the kind of guy who trusted you 100% until you proved me wrong. And I was the same way with my wife. Well, one day after work, my wife calls me and says she is bringing dinner home and asked me what did I want. But she had me on speakerphone and it sounded like she had 2 other women in the car. One of the women blurted out, "Hey, are you coming to Miami with us?" I hesitated and asked my wife, "Who is she talking to?" My wife said, "She is talking to you," still perplexed. I said, "No, I will probably be working." When my wife got home, we had a discussion about her going to Miami and not telling me. We got into a heated discussion. And that's when she told me that going to Miami was a last-minute decision. And she was going to tell me, and she didn't expect her friend to blurt it out. My wife later told me they went to a bar and one of her friends had a little bit too much to drink. As a real estate agent, my wife was always meeting different people, going to different neighborhoods, doing things in the community and helping other people. But as I said previously, she was a big flirt. My wife made upwards of $120,000 per year as a real estate agent. I was just barely making $40,000 per year, but my wife didn't start out making that amount. It took her years to her credit. She was hustling a few days before she left for Miami. She spent a lot of money on clothes, which was surprising because her wardrobe was already quite large. Fast forward a few days and she leaves for Miami. It's only about a 4.5-hour drive from Tampa to Miami. She is supposed to be there for 4 days. On the second day, she was gone. That's when my current state of mind was shifted. When I got home from work that day, it was about 7ish p.m. There was a knock at the door. Looking through my Nest doorbell, it was a man dressed in a suit, and he had a big manila envelope with him. I opened the door. He calls out my name and said, "This is for you." He gives me the manila envelope and walks away. When I opened the envelope, there was a note with the phone number that says, "If you need to talk about the photos, give me a call." So I look at the first photo and it's my wife sitting in a man's lap with his hands all over her backside and they are kissing. It looks like they're in some nightclub. Then they were at a pool and my wife and this guy are kissing in the pool, and that's when I decided to call this number that was on the piece of paper. Turns out he was a private investigator. He was following one of the other wives because her husband had suspected she was cheating on him. His client wanted to know about everyone his wife was associated with. I continued looking at the photos and came across 3 more photos where my wife was actually being intimate with this man. By this time, I was fuming mad and heartbroken at the same time. I immediately called my dad with tears in my eyes and told him what just happened. The first thing he tells me to do is try to calm down. And the second thing he tells me to do is don't tell her anything. Don't say a word. I told my dad I won't say anything. I told him I will quietly handle this. My wife had 1 day before she got back from her trip. So after getting off the phone with my dad, I did an online consultation with a lawyer. I spilled the beans to him and told him I had proof of my wife cheating on me. Then he says, "Unfortunately, that won't matter here in Florida. Florida is a no-fault state. Then he asked, how long have you been married? I told them just over 10 years. My plan was to hire an attorney within 24 hours, but stay in the house and act like nothing was wrong. When she returned within a few hours, I was able to open 2 more accounts online, one for my direct deposit and one for general purposes. My wife came home the next morning, but she threw a monkey wrench in my system because she had the next 2 days off. I had to pause my plan for 2 days. The third day she went to work. I usually leave after her anyway. So, while she was gone, I called my dad and asked him, can he loan me the money for the lawyer, which he did. I paid the retainer for the attorney and had the attorney filed for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. After that, I packed some clothes and had my dad come with his truck and take most of my belongings to his place, but I wasn't moving in with him yet. I wanted to stay as long as I could until she is served with divorce papers. Fast forward 2 weeks, she doesn't know anything. And to my surprise, no one has told her anything. Well, another week went by, and my wife gets served at her job. She is blowing up my phone, cursing at me, what is going on, etc. That day I was at home, but after getting that phone call from my soon-to-be ex-wife, I asked my dad to come over to our place. I didn't trust her. And my dad showed up 5 minutes before she did. As soon as she came through the door, she asked me why in the hell did I file for divorce? What did I do? I reached into my bag, showed her the photos, and told her. That's why I filed for divorce. She puts her hand over her mouth in shock and started crying and trying to apologize. By this time, I didn't even want to look at her anymore. I just simply said, I will see you in court. As you can imagine, she blew up my phone with phone calls and text messages, wanting to try marriage counseling, etc. Fast forward to the divorce hearing. She hired a lawyer who tried everything. My lawyer put up a good fight, and all in all, I received $60,000 in equity from the house when we sell it, $900 a month in spousal support for 3 years, and we split the furniture, but I gave it all to her. I didn't want it. About a month later, I found out that my ex-wife had cheated before, but I never knew. One of her girlfriends wanted to tell me a long time ago that my wife cheated on me, but she felt it wasn't her business. She apologized for not telling me. I forgave her, but I told her I probably wouldn't have been married to her for 10 years. If I knew she cheated on me back then. It's been 8 months since my divorce, and my ex-wife sends me text messages almost every week, asking how I am, etc. I don't respond. I am not going to change my phone number. If I don't want to respond, I don't have to. Oh, her kids have asked about me, as she said in one text, but I still didn't respond. I am still heartbroken over this, but I have a good circle of friends who I didn't tell what was happening when all this was going on, but I am healing. I just started seeing a therapist. I will be okay. I received an email with an update to a story titled Cheating Story Podcast, Wife Cheated in Its Backseat that I recently uploaded. I will leave a link to that story in the description. Hello, my name is Abby, and I am Abby from Tony's Story, released this past Sunday, February 26, 2023. I was raised in a small town in East Texas, about 30 minutes south of Lufkin. I met my husband, Gene, after some friends set us up. I was attending a small school in Lufkin at the time. Gene was working in management at a Lufkin business. After I finished school, Gene and I got married. We had a great life and found a home in Hudson, a small community on the west side of Lufkin. We lived there for almost 8 years when Gene was offered and accepted a better job in Rockville, Maryland. So we moved. By this time I had finished school at SFA, Stephen F. Austin University, and had a BBA in accounting. I found a job in Lufkin, and once we got to Maryland, found a good job. I was in my early 30s, living in Rockville. When I discovered Gene had been cheating on me, he had got careless and apologized to me and said it would never happen again, so I forgave him. And not long after this, I stopped taking my birth control. About a year later, my daughter, Jessica, was born. I was still on maternity leave, having lunch with some friends, when one of those friends told me she saw Gene coming out of one of the local hotels, holding hands with another female. She'd also taken a photo of them that day on her phone and showed it to me. I went that very day and took several $1,000s out of my account at the bank and hired a private investigator. I also spoke to an attorney in Rockville. Within about 2 weeks, I had videos and photos of them. The private investigator did some research and discovered that Jean's AP was married and lived at the address. Some of the photos were taken. I also went to see my OBGYN to see if she could order a STD test for me. She did not, but made a call and I got an appointment with another person that did. Later, my test came back clean. I remembered getting so angry at that woman's husband that he could not keep his wife out of my husband's arms. So angry that I was not going to tell him anything. Then that same friend said, "Abby, that man could say the same thing about you." That night I confronted Gene and told him to get the hell out of my house. Later, I turned to my notice at my job and started planning my return to Texas. Jean accepted that our marriage was over, but begged me not to say anything to her husband. I did not say I would or would not. As time went by, I came to better understand that husband had to be told. So, I stalked him for a while. I was not working at the time. I had made copies of all the photos and had put the videos on a thumb drive. I learned his name was Paul and went to play golf and by chance saw his car parked at a small restaurant near the country club. I walked in, not really knowing who he was. I saw a man that I figured would be married to a 30-something female, and as luck would have it, I was talking to Paul. I won't repeat the story as told by Paul. That afternoon, I flew out of the area on a flight headed to Houston. When a cousin picked me and my baby up, I stayed there recovering from childbirth and finally found a job. I did not return to the Lufkin area. Then I took some time off to fly back to Maryland so I could meet with my attorney and go over the hearing. Gene did not fight me. After the hearing, I got called some names by him for bussing up his AP's marriage. I let it go. I then called Paul and told him about the outcome. I then flew back to Houston and to this day have never returned to Maryland. We did sell the house and Gene sent me half of the house money from the sale. I used that money to buy the house I am living in today. I still stay in contact with Paul. Gene, for the most part, won't come to visit his daughter. Since our divorce was final, he has visited her 2 times. I do know that Gene and Paul's ex are still seeing each other. I still have friends in Rockfield that see them out at times. I go out from time to time, but fine. Most of these men are not interested in a single mom my age. I am still open to getting remarried, but refuse to do anything that would cause Jessica harm. If you found this story gripping, please like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible tales. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.